I looked him in the eye and said, I will generate $1 billion in revenue outside the United States for the company. I didn't realize we would do it in 18 months. We went from about 600 million to 4.1 billion in 24 months. The only company to ever have experienced hyper growth prior to AI, like an OpenAI, is Zoom. People were working 18 hours.
It just never stopped.
They never stopped. Meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting.
Can the next generational AI company be built in the state of Florida? All right, welcome to another episode of the Florida Funders or FLF Skin in the Game podcast. My name is Saxon and I'm the managing partner here at FLF. As always, we are so excited to be here back at the Skin in the Game podcast, where we interview and host some of the best founders, investors, limited partners, general partners in all of the entire country. And today, I could not be more excited to have one of my good friends, a limited partner here at FLF, and a man that has an amazing background, but you probably don't know about, Mr. Abe Smith. Abe, how are you?
Good to see you, Sax. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Happy to have you here as always. And as we started this conversation in the pre-roll, you and I have an interesting background around meeting. If you want to tell that story just to kick us off.
Look, I think you grade every relationship on how somebody eats barbecue. And, it all started meeting Saxon in a barbecue restaurant deliberately, I want to say. So it wasn't just a bump in, but we had lunch together, as you probably recall, Saxon in Naples, Florida, Mission Barbecue. A little plug for Mission. Excellent barbecue, fun, easy place to go to. But that's where every great partnership and frankly, every great business starts. It's usually over a meal. It's human and it's getting to know people. And then it's understanding philosophies and values that, make something great. And that's where our relationship started.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just like NVIDIA started at Denny's, our relationship started at Mission Barbecue, right?
Exactly.
It's obvious.
Exactly.
Well,
You're the pancakes. We're going straight to the ribs.
Yeah, no, we went straight to the meat, as we always do. So I wanna kind of really legitimize yourself early on, because most of our founders probably don't, or most of our listeners, probably don't know who you are, which, nothing against our listeners, but you have an unbelievable background and you brought that unbelievable background to Florida, which we're going to talk about. But, why are you on the show today? What gives you the clout? What's your claim to fame?
Well, I don't know that there's any fame here, but I could say there's stuff that I claim. So look, the journey to Florida is very deliberate, and we came here for family reasons, and that's what brought us here. But then actually, once I became a part of the community, I really wanted to become a part of the community. And, I think it's leveraging where I came from and now where I sit today. So I guess to answer your question, where I came from, a little bit about myself. Yes, the last 25 years I've spent in Silicon Valley building high growth, really hyper growth SaaS companies around the world. And those are companies that started from $0 all the way up to over 4 billion, and then actually multinationals like Oracle and Cisco that were hundreds of millions and hundreds of billions of dollars. The roles were pretty diverse, usually president, general manager, chief revenue officer, GVP, that kind of level. And, I was very lucky to be a part of all kinds of eclectic companies, which is a little bit of a unique element of the fabric of what I've done. So that includes, 2 companies that were acquired, so early stage companies that were acquired, 2 companies that we took public, which was really fun of listing a company, and then 3 companies that were already public and very large that the design was really to grow them faster, bigger, stronger, and actually bring next generation technology into traditional organizations like an Oracle, for example. I would say really where, I differentiated, where I pride myself is, I have a belief that I have, a decent IQ, but probably just as high of an EQ. And I've applied that very specifically outside the United States. So, bridging Silicon Valley or high growth tech to places, a lot of places that people don't go, like Middle East, Asia, Pacific, etc. I've lived in Japan. I speak Japanese. I've lived in Europe. I had a president role in London. I've traveled extensively around the world, and I've been very fortunate to do that. So a lot of operational strength in those areas. And my philosophy now is, how do I take that not just to Silicon Valley, but to other really fantastically interesting places like here in Florida?
Yeah, no, I love it. And I mean, just, I joke claim to fame, but it really isn't. I mean, names like Zoom in the height, which we're going to dive into some stories there, names like WebEx in the height. I mean, you have been a part of some of the largest growth stories in all of the world and in all of Silicon Valley. Let me ask you this, because you're not a Silicon Valley guy originally. You're not a West Coast guy. What drove you to the West Coast when you were a young whippersnapper? What was the original kind of impetus to get you out there as a young guy?
Right. I would hope that I still fall into the young whippersnapper category. I'm no Saxon, but let's be clear here. But that's okay. If I had good voice, good looks, and intelligence.
There's young, middle. Oh, you're in the right on the cusp of the young whippersnapper. Yes.
Everybody in the audience, you see how he just beautifully positions that. It's this is classic leadership in its finest in Florida. So, yeah, born and raised in Boston, so I'm from the East Coast originally. So it's actually good to be back here in the East Coast, albeit in the Southeast. And frankly, like, I made a journey to the Midwest, and then I was very deliberate in moving to Silicon Valley. Like, the moment was there, and I think we're in that moment again. Actually, we're in a bigger moment with AI. So,
what year was that original move to Silicon Valley?
I moved to Silicon Valley in the late 90s, early 2000s. So like right around.
So frame that, right? That's internet, boom, bust, everything kind of happening out of the valley, right?
Yeah, 100%. So it was the advent of the internet. Like the dot-coms were being listed. And actually, I remember the moment where I thought, hey, I need to get out here. So I was working in traditional business in Missouri. So the good news was I was studying under a mentor who was really teaching me about sales, go-to-market, and then international development. But it was not in a fast-paced, high-growth business. And I was in Chicago, and I was at the Fairmont Hotel on a business trip, and I got the New York Times, and I was reading the New York Times, and it was at the time when companies were being funded with a PowerPoint deck, like a $10 million seed round. So it was a crazy heady period. And I had friends out in the Valley, and I was going out to Silicon Valley, just catching the vibe a little bit, and then, frankly, understanding and assessing where I could fit in. And I had a friend who was a very intelligent coder who was building his own business, and we were working on it together. And then eventually it was, hey, look, you got to pack up the car and move to Silicon Valley, and we did that. I did that. So I was engaged at the time. We were getting married. I was literally like, I've got to do this. So it's one of those pioneer moments where it was different, and you knew it. So I literally loaded up the car, drove out to Silicon Valley, lived on a friend's couch for a couple months, and then eventually got an apartment. And then joined a seed.
I'm sure your fiance loved.
Yeah, she was like, "Hey, this is
right." That was a perfect way to start the
I'm
marriage.
not sure marrying the right guy moment, right? But look, it worked out. She always had an interest in San Francisco, so it worked out great at a family level. Never looked back, but boy, there are moments where you do look back. I joined a seed-funded company, and then the dot-com bust happened, right? So I think we all remember the bubble bursting. And it's not fun to be in a seed-funded company where you are pre-revenue. Frankly, you haven't even barely launched the product, and now you have to close the company down. So that was a harrowing moment in the early days of being married. And then, frankly, how do you convert and pivot to a new company that had real potential? And that's what happened.
When you got out there, how electric was that scene? I mean, how on fire was it? How was just the feeling that everywhere you went? Because you hear these stories now in our AI revolution that you walk into any coffee shop, you walk into any bar, and everybody's wearing their logos and talking about the next model that's coming out and what they're doing on their own compute. How was it back then compared to Missouri or compared to anywhere else in the world?
Look, I mean, it was certainly electric. Now, you had a little bit of a little fear and uncertainty because the bubble was bursting. So people said, is this a trend or is it a reality? And everybody who was there, and this is an important part about the Valley, and I'm sure we're going to talk about Silicon Valley a little bit, there's an ethos and a conviction that is unwavering. So when folks are in, they are in, and they know that this is transformative moments. I was lucky enough to work for John Chambers at Cisco, and one of the things Chambers always talked about were markets in transition. And when you see a market in transition, you have to be prepared for what that dramatic change looks like, but you have to stay the course. And people were highly convicted. So, yeah, there was moments of doubt, and the financial markets were getting a little wacky, and then things like Webvan failed, and Pets.com failed. But then, ironically, they actually led the way to Amazon, and they led the way to Chewy.com and other incredible applications that are really part and parcel today. So, I think there was everybody wearing their logos. I mean, the interesting thing about Silicon Valley and being there at that time is it's all people talk about, right? So you're not there to talk
it's all
about.
Encompassing.
Yeah, it's not potato chips, and it's not manufacturing, and it's not this, and it's not that. It's tech. So if you want to make a movie, you move to Hollywood. If you want to get into tech, you move to Silicon Valley. That's why I did it, to be honest with you. I wanted to be in the show.
I want to come back to that point later in the conversation about, having to be in Silicon Valley then compared to now, and your kind of thoughts around that, because it's a conversation that you and I have had many of times. But let's go back to your story. So first startup that you're working at fails when you get out there. Second startup, was that a failure or success?
No, second startup was WebEx. So, for anybody who
Got it.
understands.
So, okay, let's now talk about that, because that is exciting. Were you one of the early employees? Were you?
Yeah, relatively early. Like first, it's life changing. We'll get into the idea of like working with people that you trust and care about, and then it's also how there's serendipity in this stuff. Like when you look at technology, the difference between great technology and not so great technology a lot of times is timing and luck, right? So it was interesting when I was at the seed funded company. Frankly, we had no money to sell and market our products, so I had to do everything virtually. And I wandered onto WebEx as a platform and a product to use for virtual meetings, a lot like the session that we're on today, only better. So the reality is, had to say that. Sorry, plug for
only
my
better.
friends in Zoom.
Only better.
Plug for our friends in Zoom. But the the truth was at WebEx, I felt like this technology is amazing. So very quickly, I was like, look, I needed to use the technology to keep the business afloat. And then I called the sales rep at the time, this guy, Chris Hardiman. I remember him to the day. Still, he's a good friend now. And I said, Chris, look, one or two things are going to happen. We're either going to get funded in our startup, and I'm going to buy a subscription of WebEx, and we're going to continue to use this and pay you lots of money, or we're going to run out of money, and I'm going to call you up and ask you for a job. And it turned out to be the latter. And then, honestly, I went into the company. I came in as a sales rep, an individual contributor. And at the time,
how many employees when you came in?
There was probably a couple hundred, I would say. So
it wasn't small, but it wasn't a behemoth.
Yeah, it was time. So the company went public. The story goes, the company went public. We were listed as a publicly listed company as WebEx. We traded and grew the company extremely well, and then eventually the company was acquired by Cisco for $3.2 billion, which at the time was the largest acquisition in SaaS ever. Right? It was game changing. And John made the decision himself to buy the company. In fact, he made the decision in 3 days. It's a legendary story because it became the cornerstone and the jewel for their unified communication strategy. The experience was incredible because what it taught me was, number one, there was a professionalization of sales. A gentleman by the name of Dave Berman ran the sales organization and was amazing. I mean, many of the leaders in Silicon Valley and enterprise SaaS came from his tutelage. And the focus was around the vital few and how we built the company. We focused on less, not more. We executed an extremely focused way. So we were very professional in our approach on the sales and marketing. So the go-to-market was as strong as the product, and that was the difference. Like as good as the product was, so was our go-to-market, and the technology was excellent, right? So we built game-changing technology, and then we had what I call at the time on the sales side, we had lunatic executors, people that were just crazy, passionate, motivated, excited, but they were pioneers. And what they saw was, hey, look, if we take this to market, we have to evangelize it. We have to be able to convert people that said, hey, there's no way I'll ever do I don't even know what a podcast is, but if I ever did it, I would never do it anything other than a face-to-face environment, or I would never sell a product other than face-to-face. I would never market face-to-face. So that evangelism became part of the ethos of how we built excitement for that company and other companies. The team became extremely important. The culture that we built was electric, and it became something that we then proselytized as we grew into other companies. A lot of Silicon Valley leaders came from that environment. And then last but not least, we found that people traveled in packs. So as teams start to get formed, and as you go to the next company, you remember talent and you remember who you liked working with.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you hit all the buzzwords that we look for when investing in a company: passion, great leadership, a team that's just hungry, sophisticated but crazy, right? It's that blend of both.
Yeah.
If you look back at this success, if there's one word to define the success of WebEx during that time, what would it be?
I would say groundbreaking. At the time, there were only, honestly, think back to the time, there were only two companies that were innovating and leading in enterprise SaaS: Salesforce.com and WebEx. At the time, we were actually growing at the same pace, at the same velocity, at the same time. Differences: Salesforce went right and took the company, maintained as an independent, publicly traded company, and Mark Benioff is an incredible leader and scaled that organization to next generation level. And then, WebEx decided to sell the organization and commit to Cisco, and that became a different strategy and a different outcome. Zoom is an outgrowth of what probably was possible in that world. But even the term SaaS, just Saxon on SaaS.
SaaS. Not SaaS.
Let's get it right.
SaaS.
On SaaS. That's a meme clip right there. Sax on SaaS is I remember, at the time it was like online services and so forth. And Subra Iyer, who was the CEO and co-founder of WebEx, said one day in a team meeting, just said, look, we are no longer a cloud company. We're not an internet company. We are a SaaS company. And everybody looked around and said, what's SaaS? Like, what does that even mean?
What the hell is SaaS? I like this guy, but what is he talking about?
Okay.
What is he talking about?
What is he talking about? But he was right? So ultimately, that became how you start to galvanize a category, how you galvanize a go-to-market, how you galvanize what you are, and then what you become is actually what you define.
Yeah. So you rose the ranks. I mean, I cut you off earlier because I was just so excited about the story, but You started as a sales rep. By the time you guys sold to Cisco, what were you doing?
I was running actually at Cisco, I was running all of unified communications for Cisco on their side. But when I started, I went from sales rep. Within a year, I was managing the team that I was a rep for. A year later, I was director and running a big part of the domestic go-to-market business. We started weaving Latin America into into what I started to manage, and then before the acquisition, I was running all of emerging markets, Asia Pacific, Latin America, for WebEx at the time. Yeah.
WebEx gets sold to Cisco. Great acquisition, largest in SaaS history at the time.
Yep.
What's next for Abe? Did you stay on board at Cisco after that?
I did 2 years with Cisco. Which was a good tour of duty, and again, you learn a lot. What I realized is I'm a startup and growth guy, right? So it's different a little bit when you're part of a large organization. The dynamics are quite different, like the bureaucracy, the governance, etc. And there's a real power to that. The brand's incredible, the reach is incredible, and John Chambers had an amazing vision for where he was taking the company. But I really sought out growth and dynamic growth, and I joined smaller growth companies. I joined a company called MindJet, which was an innovator in productivity and mind mapping. Thought it was going to be the next best thing. It was a $50 million company. I was running Americas and international for the company. Turns out it wasn't. There was an exit. The company was ultimately bought by Corel, so it was a good exit, and mergers that took place in that company, but modest, right? So I joined another growth company, and one of the fastest growing SaaS companies at the time to go from $0 to $10 million, which was a small company called Badgeville, founded by a great entrepreneur, Chris Duggan, who is a colleague from WebEx, by the way, and he raised $40 million very quickly in A and B round funding. And then we were trying to galvanize a category around gamification, believe it or not, which was very different. And I was running strategic channels and how we were working with large companies like SAP, Salesforce, Calidus, American Express, Global Travel, a variety of others. So, but met some great people, and then I went on to Oracle. So at Oracle, I intentionally joined Oracle. I was running their cloud division. So I was running international for their cloud division on the go-to-market. And it was really the early days of cloud for Oracle. So Oracle needed renegade cloud folks, and we acquired 19 companies on a MarTech and SaaS level, and we built what was called Marketing Cloud to be the tip of the spear for the overall, you could say Sales Cloud, Marketing Cloud, Service Cloud combination to compete with Salesforce. And we led the way. We did a really good job of building that business, and then from there I went on. I followed the senior vice president who became CEO. I took a president role on a private equity funded company that we took public in a SPAC called Cision. It was about a $700 million company, and I ran the European markets for that company, living in London. We took the company public, we acquired companies, and then grew the organization. And then it was eventually that company was took private again by a company called Platinum Equity. And then on January 16th, 2019, I think it was, I left Cision, and on January 19th, 2019, I joined Zoom. And that was well before the pandemic. So just to give you a little bit of history.
This is a full year and 2 months, 3 months before the pandemic. How did you end up at Zoom? And when you joined Zoom, give us a frame of reference. What was the company? What did it look like at that point?
Yeah, the company was a little bit more mature. And what was great about the company, Sax, was that, first of all, it was built by people that I trusted and cared for. So let's start there. You talked about founders, and the founder of the company is an incredible visionary by the name of Eric Yuan. And Eric actually, we worked together at WebEx's, and we knew each other, and we got to know each other as colleagues. And when Eric was starting,
what was his role at WebEx's?
He was the head of engineering. So.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, he was not the founder of WebEx. He was the head of engineering, and he built the platform. He's an incredible engineer. So, sales guy meets tech guy. We became fast friends, and Eric stayed longer than I did actually at Cisco. He stayed for 4 years at Cisco and managed building out the infrastructure for WebEx at the time. But what bothered him at the final days of Cisco WebEx was that people just weren't happy. They were not satisfied with the platform. So Eric went to Cisco and said, "Hey, look, I'll rebuild the entire platform for you end to end. We'll make it next generation correct so that it'll appeal and it'll be satisfying for our customers." And unfortunately, Cisco just didn't have the appetite to do that. So
interesting. I was going to ask you, how the story of Zoom sort of started, but that was the impetus right there. Because you look at and you hear stories of, Facebook wasn't the first social media company to start, but it became the biggest. And so many stories about Apple, wasn't the only PC company, but it became, or Microsoft became the best PC company, and it beat out IBM. These small players, and we believe this here at FLF, like these small players are the ones that are going to shift the market, are the ones that are going to create the best products because they're dynamic, they're nimble, they're run by exciting, passionate founders with great teams. So the story was Eric just thought he could build a better product?
This story is amazing because, first of all, when Eric rolled out to start the company, he started the company with a thesis around happiness and care. That's it, right? So philosophically, he wanted people, his employees, his customers, and obviously the world at large to be happy. And then he also felt that the more you care for yourself, you care for your customers, you care for your community, and you care for one another, good things happen. And that ethos is so fundamentally beautiful and pure that you can build anything around that. Now, it also turns out that he was extremely amazing at this one categorical area. So Eric is very good at many things, but as it pertains to unified communications, he's the best in the world, right? And building it, by the way, is extremely hard. So when you think about like video on FaceTime, or you think about video on a web browser or video anywhere, we take for granted you press a button and it's perfect. What it takes to actually deliver that is extremely complex. Now, when Eric left Cisco, within a month, 30 engineers resigned and joined him, right? So his core team came with him. And he wasn't exactly sure what he was going to build, but he had early investors, a lot like FLF, that believed in him and wrote a check based on him.
Yep.
Now, at the time, I think Eric was 40 years old, which is old for a founder. So it was, number one, betting on an older founder was a little counterculture. A lot of early founders were in their 20s. a little bit different. Number two, the category seemed like, why would you invest in video? I mean, think about it. At the time,
players are already there. Skype is around. Dominant players.
Cisco
there.
WebEx was a $1 billion franchise. Microsoft was a multi-billion-dollar franchise on video. LogMeIn was a $500 million company, right, on video. So categorically, people thought he was crazy. But his thesis was, no, it's video first, it's mobile first. We're going to take this in a different direction, and we're going to create extreme quality, better product at a better price with better service. Winning combination. You can't get any simpler. And then over time, it scaled. I joined at a different inflection point. The company that actually was already successful. So when I joined, the company was doing about $300 million. It was pre-IPO. We had not issued the S1 yet. But what we knew was that international was going to be extremely important.
$300 million in revenue the company was doing when you joined.
Yeah, $300 million in revenue.
Is that what we meant? Yeah, got it. Okay.
Yeah, about $300 million in revenue. And what was interesting, Sax, the company was growing at 100% year over year. So from 150 to 300, it was growing at relative scale. Back then, that was game changing, number one. And we were doing it profitably. Okay, so 1 + 1 equals, holy cow, this is amazing. When I joined, I knew a lot of the team members, and I came in to say, hey, look, let me help you grow everything outside the United States. Because I looked Eric in the eye and I said, look, right now we're doing about, rough numbers, about $50 million outside the United States. There's a handful of folks. I looked him in the eye and said, I will generate $1 billion in revenue outside the United States for the company. And I didn't realize we would do it in 18 months, thanks to the pandemic. But who knew, right?
Was it now when you were thinking about going from 50 million to $1 billion? Is that B2B sales or was that B2C sales?
B2B. 100% B2B.
B2B.
There was
B2B sales.
And what people think about Zoom a lot of times because of the pandemic is B2C, but it was never the company's intention. In fact, it ended up creating a little bit more stress and anxiety for the company in that hyper growth phase because honestly, we didn't know how to monetize that. The company wasn't built with that model. In fact, the free version of Zoom, which was an incredible breakthrough because when you think about it, people were giving free trials that were 30-day trials of a product. They were never giving free product. Eric gave the entire product away for free. The only limitation was time. The meetings ended within 40 minutes. So what we didn't realize is that everybody and their brother was going to use that and then the stress it would create on the company. So when the company, when the pandemic hit, there were hundreds of millions of people that just found Zoom. And that stress was unbelievable. But it was an engineering feat that we were able to maintain that and provide that service to everyone around the world.
So I wanna fast forward to the pandemic, and I want to read some numbers that I wrote down.
Sure.
Pandemic hits, users go from 10 million to 300 million
active users
in 4 months.
Yeah.
Revenue year over year.
Which, by the way, put that in perspective. Like that at the time, at 300 million active users was probably the second most trafficked social network in the world, other than Facebook.
That's in 4 months.
Yeah.
4 months, right? Okay. Revenue year over year from 2020 to 2021 goes from 623 million to 2.65 billion.
Yeah.
Year over year.
Correct.
Right? Share price goes from $70 a share to $559 per share year over year from 2020 to 2021.
Yep.
Hyperscale is a word that I use for these types of companies. That word isn't even strong enough to represent what happened with this company. My first question is, why Zoom? Back to our earlier point, there's all these video platforms out there at the time. Zoom is around, Zoom is there. Why did the world go to Zoom when the pandemic hit?
I think there's 3 reasons. And by the way, just to also add to your numbers, we went from about 600 million to 4.1 billion in 24 months. So when you talk about hyper growth, the 600 million to 2.7 was in 1 year, and within 24 months we were already 4.1 billion. So insane. And we went from about 1,500 employees during that period to about 8,000. So when you talk about hyperscale in like an AI context, they're seeing it. The only company to ever have experienced hyper growth prior to AI, like an OpenAI, is Zoom.
Was Zoom.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, anyways,
All right, so your three reasons. Why did the world just go to Zoom?
I think there were three primary reasons. Number one, the product just worked, right? So that was one of the taglines, and it was true. The product worked every time; it never failed. Touch wood. So number two, ethos. Like, we cared. So the company cared, and when you care about others, there's an attraction to why you're providing your service, because you mean it more than just providing it for money and commercial growth. And then, number three, right place at the right time. Like, we had a free trial, which was never intended for this use. But when something catches on a viral basis, Sax, it catches on. And people found the free trial. And then it became wildfire.
Yeah. Another type of fire that's typically associated with this growth is dumpster fire. Right? You have mega growth in companies like WeWork, and you hear about the insane employee count growing up, and there's just so many cracks in the foundation that things just sort of fall apart. Yeah. And you hear the word dumpster fire. When you guys look at the growth and think about those years, what was it like? Was it controlled in any capacity? Was it uncontrollable? What was the rhetoric around the cooler? What was it like?
I mean, it's hard to explain, but I'll do my best. First of all, in some ways we were prepared for it. Okay, most of the people in the company, including myself, we were veterans of SaaS, so we weren't new. Number one, to the category and what it took. Number two, we built the company for scale. Right, so the company was being built for scale. Now, again, no one had experienced anything like this, but like the platform, for example, on the technical level, was designed for complete elasticity and unlimited scale. Now, that was never tested. In the pandemic, it actually was, but the design was there, I would say. Three, again, was the culture. The culture actually was fundamentally on day one built around trust, care, respect, and then just a commitment to very disciplined execution. And then when we got into the execution point day to day, we had daily stand-ups. I mean, we were dealing with stuff that just no one had experienced before, and there was no precedence for it. Every system broke internally because, we weren't used to getting hundreds of thousands of leads a week, right? So, the volume was incredible, and we had to really triage things. So the strategy became more of a triage. We dealt with issues real time, every day. We had stand-ups, and then frankly we executed real time. And then we had people that were incredibly committed. I mean, because we were on a mission, and this is also very fundamentally different. It's true to the ethos of Silicon Valley. When you're on a mission and you're doing something where you really feel you're changing the world, AI is changing the world. Zoom at the moment was supporting and changing the world. It was a mission. People relied on us. Sax, when people rely on you for educational continuity, business continuity, health continuity, or the world stops, social connection, while people were socially at home and they had to be at home. So those things really fueled an unbelievable stamina, which, by the way, is ephemeral. You can't run at that pace, whether you're 1,000 people or 8,000 people or 100 people. You can't run at that pace forever, which is why I think people need to rethink a little bit of this 997 culture, because it's not.
That's where I was going next. I mean, you have to be working around the clock to support this type of company. I mean, were people working just 12 hours a day, 7 days a week?
People were working 18 hours.
Stopped.
People were working 18 hours.
It just never stopped.
They never stopped. I was on a Zoom, and so was Eric. I mean, if you look at some of the interviews with Eric did not sleep for long durations in peace. Meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. So and this is where the word Zoom fatigue came in.
Yeah.
People just got tired of being.
Everybody got it. Everybody got it. I mean, it was a part of the game. Did the employees? Two questions here. Were employees very fatigued? And then secondarily, obviously, I talked about share price. People were making a shit ton of money at this company at this point. How much talk of there was that, and how much gas was continued to be put in the tank because of how much money people were making?
I think people realized that there was a unique opportunity to to do fine for themselves and their family. And honestly, the company was very generous. Like, the company was very generous about sending things to the home, making sure that there was, food baskets coming your way, or, swag coming your way, or whatever the case may be. Like, WebEx, sorry, I said it again, I can't believe it. Zoom blankets. We're talking about the old, let's go to the new. Zoom blankets.
Yeah.
So I think, the stamina was there because people felt they were doing the right thing. And sure, it's fun. Fun is the wrong word, but it's energizing when you're fulfilling. It's hard when, companies are seeing churn, or, the business is retracting, you're reducing headcount, you're not adding headcount. But there's cultural strain that happens with that. You're getting to know people very quick. And again, the ethos of the company was built around speed of trust. Saxon joins the company, I get to know you, I trust you, day one. If you betray my trust, it's a different story. But the truth is, we have to put our hands in yours. Our faith is surrounded by one another. And then we had to continue to galvanize the mission. I mean, there were moments, Sax, I'll give you just one example on a cultural moment, which I think is so indicative of who Eric was. Eric was going through a ton of stress. The company was growing like weeds. He was, wealth was gained and lost. I mean, all kinds of things was happening. He was exhausted. I had a team meeting with my international leadership team at 11 o'clock at night, because it's the only time you can meet with everybody together at the right time.
Yeah.
And we were meeting, going through the vital few and talking about what we had to execute on and how we deployed across the team. And right before the meeting, I said, hey, Eric, I've got the team coming on. Do you mind joining for just a couple minutes? Give them a couple words on how you're feeling. And you got to remember, this was at a time also where, in some ways, the man was getting attacked, right? He was also he was celebrated and then attacked, and we can talk about that for hours. But he was tired and exhausted. He comes into the meeting and he says, look, here's the truth, guys. There's one thing you need to think about. When we look back 20 years from now, we look at our 20-year-ago self, ask yourself one question. One question. Did we do the right thing? Did we do the right thing? Did we give away the product for free to 25 countries so they could educate their kids and make sure that system worked? We did. That's the right thing. Did we make sure that companies weren't gorged, taken advantage of when they needed the product, and we set it up and deployed it so Accenture and 100,000 employees could work every day and continue to do their job? We did. So when you ask yourself those kinds of questions, when you have a leader that is that pure and that intentional, I mean, everybody left that meeting and was like, I'm not going to bed tonight. We're working.
Whatever the fuck I need to do, I'm going to do it.
Whatever we're going to do.
It's interesting because this company, and this is really the first time I've heard more details from you about this, so we've known each other for, give or take 5 years.
Yeah.
It seems like just the foundation of team, culture, and trust allowed this company to grow at rapid pace and not have the dumpster fire that these other high growth companies fall into. I mean, is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. And you got to remember, the weight is on your shoulders. So, it's how people respond and react. And then, we also had good leaders and managers that were able to coach and develop and work with people remotely, right? So there was no...
Yeah. Which is another added challenge, by the way. This was all done during COVID. I mean, and not COVID of today where you get COVID and you're sick for 3 days. I mean, this is quarantine yourself for 3 weeks. Don't see anybody in the world COVID.
Yeah, we had the same issues that everybody else was issuing. How do you get to know somebody? How do you trust somebody? So, look, I'm extremely proud of that company. I revere Eric because he's an exceptional leader. I think what we built was not only generational, it was monumental. And I think we did something extremely special at the time the world needed it. And then the company continues to provide exceptional products with care and love.
It's the best product.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's the best product out there.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump to a topic that we started talking about a little earlier, and I think that we can finish up the Zoom conversation here. Would the Zoom story have been a success anywhere else outside of Silicon Valley? Obviously, a remote company, but would it have been able to be as successful as it was without the Silicon Valley personas, without the individuals that came from the Valley and had that Valley background? Because I want to dive into your Silicon Valley past compared to what you see now around the rest of the world in terms of company building and investing.
For that unique company, absolutely not. I mean, first of all, the majority of the people that started and built the company were from the Valley, right? So this comes down to working with teams that have worked together. They already have trust and they know how to execute. So that team was foundationally built, from CFOs to presidents to technical to sales go-to-market, you name it. A lot of people had worked together, they knew each other. And 90+% of those folks had come from the Valley. So I think the situational environment was extremely important. Primary investors, the folks that wrote the first checks, who did extremely well, and are both very good friends, are both Valley legends, right? So they wrote the first check because they believed in Eric. So that company wouldn't have existed really unless a lot of Silicon Valley money had said, we believe in you. So I think there was a lot of perfect storm that said, no, I don't think that could, because frankly, there are other video companies that were not in the Valley that did not do as well and they imploded. So I think that's
100%.
Short and long answer.
When you look at Silicon Valley and everything that you know about it, obviously the mecca of technology, but you're a Florida guy now.
Right.
What's some bad about Silicon Valley? And we had Jeff Wu and Rohan Shah last week at our Venture Summit, and both of them gave some of these answers, which was super interesting.
Yeah.
What are some of the negatives of having a company and being in Silicon Valley? Because you typically only hear about the positives.
Yeah, look, I think the intensity can be punitive, right? So over time, it's when you look at the physical environment of Silicon Valley, I mean, you're in the middle of Northern California. There are mountains to the left, there are oceans to the right. There's Tahoe down the road. There's incredible places to be outside and go hiking, etc. I don't think I hiked for 5 years in the Valley. Certainly very soon, right? So there is an intensity that belies the success. People work hard, right? So I think that can have a toll in different ways, physically, mentally, your family, and a variety of other stuff. There's a tax to that. So I'm not sure that that's always healthy. And that's why when I reference the 997 culture, which is happening everywhere, I've seen that from New York to California to Florida. It's a risk. It's a real risk. I think you've got, I don't personally believe in work-life balance. I do think that there is sacrifices that have to be made, but there's also a time and a place for it. You don't have to miss every birthday party. You don't have to, you don't have to say, I'm not going to get married in May because ... There's things that take precedence, and when people struggle, it takes a toll. So I think that does have that's a negative ramification of the Valley.
Let's fast forward to the world of AI. You and I, once again, have had this conversation so many times. I verbatim heard you say, I need to get involved in an AI company because what I'm seeing right now is the exact transformational shift that I saw in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yes.
And, this is where the smartest people in the world are working. When you look at the growth of AI, what's your just overall take of what you're seeing in the market right now, and what excites you about this new world of artificial intelligence that we're in the middle of this transformation of?
Yeah, this is one man's opinion, but I think it's fairly founded. This is bigger than anything in our lifetime. Zero pause. As big as the internet was, which I helped grow and develop, as big as cloud computing was, which I helped build and galvanize, as big as mobile and social was, this is at an order of magnitude more important, more transformational, and more disruptive. So I think what's happening in AI, generative AI, and then specifically as you get into adjacent elements of next generation technology with quantum and robotics and otherwise, I can't even put it into words. I am not only a convert, I am fully in belief. Now, will you have bumps along the way akin to what we saw with the dot-com bubble burst? Of course you will. Will there be market compression? Of course there will be. Will there be winners and losers? Of course there will be. But there will be game-changing outcomes which have sociological impacts, which have geopolitical impacts, which have commercial impact, which has GDP impact. I mean, it's pretty monumental, Sax.
Well, and if you look at the current market, and when I say market in our world, that doesn't mean the stock market, although it's all markets. When you look at the AI market, my thought is, we're really kind of in that third inning, right? The first 3 innings were foundational models, and then GPT wrappers on top of foundational models. We're at the point now where the majority of those latter companies have failed. there's not much there because the bigger players have just eaten them up and allowed you to do any of this on their models. Where I believe we're at right now is true enterprise AI is sort of at the end as well. My thought is when you look at valuations in the venture and private equity market and you start seeing mediocre teams with mediocre products demanding and getting premium valuations, that's probably time to start looking to the next segment. That's where I believe we're at right now. But 9 out of 12 of our Fund 3 investments are enterprise AI companies. We're just starting to look at, okay, what's the next iteration of this? What are your thoughts there, Abe?
Look, I think you're spot on. And first of all, I think FLF and the community here is lucky to have somebody like you at the helm who thinks that way, because you're understanding that it is the culture, it is the team, it is the excellence of the product, it is the ability to execute. So, and then to have a category that's that you can win in, right? So when you're on your 10th, 11th, 12th, 14th, 18th company that does AI empowered legal transformation, I mean, are all of them going to win? Absolutely not, right? So is one of them maybe, right? Like, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's innovation. You look for innovation in models. Are people innovating how they're deploying the model? Whether that's front-loading engineers to execute for the company, or whether forwarding your engineering team, or whether it's a pricing model which is outcome-based pricing, or whatever. Like there's a lot of I think real innovation, but you fundamentally you go back to the fundamentals. You look at the founder first, right? So the founder is critical. Do they have depth of categorical knowledge? Are they unique in their position? Can they lead and grow at a certain scale level? Do they have that factor? Are they willing to risk it all? And then you start to understand how well they're building the tech itself. Like, I've been amazed at some of the excellence I've seen over the tech that's been built over a short time. And then I've also been very disappointed in some of the tech that I've seen. It's actually marginal. And, in other cases, you also look for, the category itself. Like, what does it look like? I'm involved with a company right now which is extremely powerful in agentic security. And, what I found is the team is, it's 35 PhDs that have been studying and deploying on this category for 15 years. The research dates back, no joke, 15 years ago. I didn't know AI existed 15 years ago, right? So they were already working on that across machine learning. They have deployed a functional product that is excellent. Their early adopter customers are amazing. The venture is highly supportive. And then you have venture, and you have people that aren't dumb money. They want to participate to help the company, which, by the way, I think Florida Funders does an amazing job of that, in that you get active. And when you participate, when a company gets Saxon, they're not just getting the capital from your company, they're getting your expertise.
Or they get Abe, right? I mean, that's a huge thing for us. It's reaching out to our network. Talked a lot about this at our venture summit last week. One of our core differentiators is our unmatched network. And if you look at the 3 core pillars of that unmatched network, one of those is introductions to potential customers,
yes,
and introductions to other investors and individuals that can help these companies. I got one more question because we are running low on time.
Sure.
Can the next generational AI company be built in the state of Florida?
Sure, it can be built anywhere. The question is who, right? So if anybody's watching this podcast, call them Saxon and I if you're the one, because
call us if you're the one.
1-800,
please.
Call Sax.
Call Abe and Sax.
This is a whole new. We built a whole new business on this.
That's a new podcast that we're starting. Right. Call us.
It's going to go viral. It's huge. So look, I think sure it can. Going back to your Silicon Valley question, the Valley is uniquely positioned to create and stimulate this kind of outcome, right? And the machine works around producing this outcome, and it rallies around this kind of outcome. I think the state of Florida needs to continue to do that. We heard, the former mayor, actually, of Miami at the event last week speak very eloquently about that. Is that when Miami is welcoming this kind of community and is encouraging this kind of community and driving this kind of transformation, that's a good thing. I think when you have a group of up and comers, by the way, that start to meet as a team. Like, I'm not talking about as a company team. I was invited to a pavilion event, which is a go-to-market club, in Miami. That's great. Like more of those.
Yeah.
Like help one another. This is not always competitive. Help one another. The community builds the community. And then I think, sure, there's absolutely folks. I mean, obviously, like products can be built. The question around the one person $1 billion company and vibe coding is helping develop product much quicker, faster, better. So I think that can be anywhere. The question is it here? I don't know. But I ask the same question: is the next great one in California? Is the next great one in Texas? Is the next great one in Dubai? Is the next great one in London? They're all viable places.
We probably need a part 2 for this podcast to talk about the Middle East, because that was something we did not get to today.
We did not get to.
We'll maybe do another episode. Abe Smith part 2 will be probably our highest hitting episode that we've ever had. But Abe, I wanted to thank you for being a friend, a limited partner, and all of your help that you provide for us and your insights today and amazing stories. If you guys enjoyed the podcast today, throw us a like, throw us a share on either Instagram, LinkedIn, or YouTube. My name is Saxon. I'm the managing partner of FLF, and we will see you again soon. Thanks a bunch.